One thing I'd like to know is it would be very useful to know is firstly why you are joining today and where you're joining from. So firstly, where you're joining from, and then the main reason why you're joining this presentation today. So please, if you can include that in the chat box, that'd be helpful to me, inshallah, ta'ala, in ensuring that I meet your expectations for this presentation, for this session, inshallah. So where are you from? So we know where people who are joining us are from, and also what you want, why you joined this particular webinar. So I'll just give you just a minute just to put something in the chat box, and then I'll read some of those out, inshallah. So here, so anybody who wants to just say where they're from and why you've joined us today, including what you want to get out of today's session, inshallah. Okay, so we've got someone from the UK. Okay, and we've got someone from Abdul Hamid from Bahrain, and someone from Trinidad and Tobago. Excellent. Wow. I would like to know a bit more about how Muslims can understand and relate to the LGBTQ movement. Very good. Yeah. And then somebody from Carolina, North Carolina in the USA, who's a pediatrician and deals with many children from the LGBT community or from who have those attractions and would like to navigate the religious aspect. Good. That's very good so far. Okay, keep putting your messages up, and inshallah, as we go through the presentation, maybe we can come back to some of those. But really, I think this presentation or this particular webinar has been set up for us to talk a bit about navigating LGBTQ issues. And sometimes we see that there is that almost our greatest weapon is almost our ability to understand it from an Islamic perspective. But actually, and that's really important, but also sometimes we've also got to address the reality of the ideology underpinning the LGBTQ movement. And that's what I want to talk a bit about today. But I want to just help us through understanding, firstly, what the problem is, the impact it's having on our children, and what we can do to try and deal with that. Now, obviously, we've only got a 45-minute presentation today, so we can't cover everything that we'd like to cover, but we'll try and give you as much value as possible to help you to navigate this as a parent, as a teacher, in whatever capacity you're here today. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So what's the problem? Yeah. Firstly, our children's views on sexual relationships and LGBTQ identities are being shaped. Yeah. And that, I think sometimes that can be quite obvious. Of course, they're being shaped. The reality is, look, we live in a society, whatever society we live in, or actually it's not even about the geographical society which we live in. It's about the world that we live in, because the internet has made the world much smaller and has meant that the same influences that a child has access to in London, a child in Riyadh or in Jeddah or in Amman, in Cairo, any other part of the Muslim world can also be affected by that. So it's not just about our children's views on sexual relationships are being shaped or shaped just in terms of the localized influences that our child is brought up in, but it's also about the fact that all of these ideas and values have become globalized cores that use social media, that use all of those capacities and capabilities to influence our children. And so our children's views are being shaped. Now, that means that they can be shaped in a positive way or in a negative way. Yeah, so it's not just one way, but there is a potential to be shaped in different ways. But we need to recognize that. Yeah, our children's views are being shaped by the hypersexualized world in which our children are growing up in. Yeah, and that's really important for us to firstly understand. Yeah. And then secondly, we've got to recognize that some children, and it's not that all children are identifying as gay, but some out of those pure children who are being influenced, some children are identifying as gay, or they feel they are in the wrong body. Yeah. And this is I'm I'm getting lots more calls from parents, and I'll talk a bit about some of that in the impact section in a couple of slides time. But I think we've got to recognize that some children, as a result of this exposure and other underlying issues that they are facing, they may identify as gay and they may feel that they're in the wrong body. Now, how do we address that? And I'm going to talk about that when we look at some of the solutions at the end. And as I said, we can't go into the depth that we'd like to in this particular webinar, but we will go through some things that will be useful to you to identify how we can almost be much more proactive in addressing some of these things. But if those children are being shaped, and out of those children, some children end up identifying with the identities of the LGBTQ movement, but then there are the vast majority who are being shaped in the respect of it is leading to weakening relationships with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It can lead to gateways to paths that distance them from their true purpose. So, for example, a child could potentially come across all of these influences and values around them. It's shaping them, and then they start to doubt in Islam. They start to say, "Oh, why do we treat gay people like this? Why do we believe what we believe? Why are we being so oppressive and unjust? Why don't we show love to these people?" So sometimes the secular liberal values which underpin some of these perspectives get absorbed into our children and affect the way they sometimes perceive the things around them, and therefore it could lead to children starting to have doubts. It could lead to a gateway for children to start thinking, why is it that their perception of God that starts off from, oh, God should be like this, God should be like this, and God isn't meeting the expectation of that. So God should be loving to all, God should be just to all. But why is it that there's certain people in our society who identify as gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender? Why is it that these people then are victimized, are treated the way they are in terms of just not being accepted? Yeah, so just not being accepted or celebrated, or given the space to live their life. And I think so. So it can lead to our children's distance from their true purpose, because they start to think about, why is it that Islam doesn't meet up to the expectations that a secular liberal society so-called promises or offers. So just to summarize here, so not all of those children who are affected or who are influenced by the values around them will end up identifying as gay or feel like they're in the wrong body. Yeah? A minority will. But the potential is, if we don't tackle this as a community, if we don't start to address the correct way of viewing these things with our children and with our wider community, we can end up with children who start to develop almost a dislike or dissatisfaction with their lives as Muslims, and a dissatisfaction with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah protect our children and all of us from that, because their expectations are being shaped by the society around them. And maybe we can talk a bit more about this in the Q&A. And when we have a Q&A, I'll try and have an extended Q&A, have a longer Q&A than planned, because I really like to hear from you about some of these issues as well. So what impact is it having? So we said that there is the influences happening in society. Now, what impact is it having on our children? Yeah. So I want to go through certain examples here. Yeah. And I want to talk about examples that I've come across personally, where parents have come to me and said, look, this is what's happening in my home. And I think that helps us maybe have a bit of a reality check. One of the problems we're having is that because a lot of those families, understandably, a lot of those families who are going through this will not broadcast their experiences in the public domain. They won't say and shout from the rooftops, this is what's happening in my home, because it's very shaming, very shameful. It's not. It's very embarrassing for a parent going through this. They feel they failed. They feel they failed as a parent, and therefore, obviously, they don't want to then say to everybody, "This is what I'm going through." And so, because of that, maybe we think that this issue is not an issue, or it's not. It's something. Some people are blowing this out of proportion, but actually, it's a bigger issue than we imagine. Now, I'm not saying it's a issue that affects every home, but it affects more homes than we believe it does. So, for example, let me give you an example. Just recently, I was called by a brother who gave me some information about someone in his family, and said, "Look, he's in his early teens. Recently, he communicated to his family that he identifies as gay. Yeah, that now he identifies as gay. That he has feelings for other boys, but he doesn't have feelings for girls. Now, I asked lots of questions to start trying to get an understanding of that person's that young boy's life. Yeah, and there's a lot of there's a number of risk factors here. Yeah, and not all of those risk factors will lead to the same situation. So not all children who are undergoing these risk factors will end up identifying as gay, but you'll find that in cases where a child does, you'll find a lot of these risk factors present. So as I spoke to that brother, it came to my mind that I was ticking off a lot of these, and it was just to get an understanding of the deeper issues, because the reality is that the child will express, I identify as gay, but that's not the real issue. There's a lot of other issues that you almost have to peel to get to the actual issue itself. So to peel away those issues to get to the actual issue itself. So, for example, that child had a father who was absent from their life. Their mother and father had divorced some time ago, and the father was not really present in the child's life. Yeah, so that's an absent father, which is quite a key risk factor. That child also felt like they were different. They felt that he felt as though he was not the same as everybody else. He felt that he didn't behave maybe in the same way as other children do, other boys his age do. He doesn't like the type of things that the other boys his age like he doesn't like football, maybe, and obviously if you're from America, that would be soccer. He doesn't like playing these types of contact sports which other children do. Maybe he likes doing things which are softer and maybe less masculine, and therefore he feels as though he's different. Then he also had a lack of friends, so he was quite isolated in terms of friends, and therefore he had ended up having a very close friendship relationship with a girl who wants to be a boy in his school. So he almost developed that close. And an interesting thing was, initially he was trying to say to that girl, "Look, what you're doing is wrong. This is not right." But because of the vulnerabilities of that child, that girl almost managed to talk him into looking at the vulnerabilities in his life and diagnosing that person, that you are gay. That's who you are. Yeah, you don't like the things that boys like. You don't act in the way that no other boys do. You're quite isolated from other boys because they don't appreciate you or understand you. You're okay. You don't have a close father figure. All of these things were then being almost diagnosed by this other girl who wants to be a boy, and she convinced him that you are actually gay. So all of these issues. Imagine this boy throughout his life. He felt different. He felt left out. He didn't feel like he had friends. He felt like he was not a part of the wider community in which he lives in. So now somebody says to him, "Look, this is the reason why you felt those things." And for the boy, it feels like an epiphany. Look, it's nothing wrong with me, but this is why I'm like how I am. And so he then jumped on that and said, okay, that I'm gay. Um, and so and with the fact that around when a child identifies as gay, the support around that child and the celebration around that child from people who say, you're so brave, this is really good, you're you're so courageous, we love you, we're your family. All of those messages, and that positive reinforcement would have made that child feel something special. And so all of this is really important to understand in relation to the impact that this is having, and what is, and this will feed into some of the things that I talk about when we talk about how to be proactive in addressing this in our homes and in our community. I'll give you a couple more examples because I think it's really important. Sometimes talking about the theory behind this is not as effective, it's not as impactful. It's actually talking about some of the real examples that we've come across. So, for example, I was over the last few years, I've been speaking to on and off speaking to this young man. When he came to me, he was about 17. He's nearly 20 now, I believe. Yeah, he's nearly 20 now, and we've been speaking for some time. And he's been struggling with his same-sex attraction, and we've been speaking about what. And the thing is, he as a Muslim, and he felt initially he felt a real disgust at the attraction that he felt, and he felt, look, this is not who I want to be. This is not how I want to behave in life. This isn't. I have a real revulsion and repulsion, revulsion of this particular way of life. I don't want to live this life. And so I was speaking to him, and we're trying to discuss. I was trying to look at what are the things that he's been struggling with, and the key point problem in his life was that he's the only boy within a family of girls. So all of his elder sisters are girls, and then he's the only boy. And you'd think that if you were whoever you are, if you are a parent, and you had lots of girls, and then you had a boy, you'd feel, wow, this is very proud. Just like as if you'd have lots of boys and you had a girl, you'd feel, wow, this is like I've been blessed with a girl, or I'm blessed with a boy. But for whatever reason, which we never ever were able to understand and locate, was that his mother, who was the more dominant character in his household, because the father was much more passive, and so the mother was the real decision maker in the household. The mother take very wasn't very positive to him as he grew up. It was very, maybe she felt that he wasn't the boy that she wanted, and so she was very abusive towards him, verbally abusive, putting him down, saying, "Oh, you're not the one who I wanted." Really giving him giving the impression that he's not what wanted, he's not loved, and by his mother, which is quite a rare thing for a mother not to show that love for her child, whoever that child is. But that's what happened. And so he said he grew up feeling this real hatred towards women, a real deep hatred towards women. And he said he didn't really understand this real hatred towards women until his mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So imagine you're in that situation. You've been diagnosed with terminal cancer. It's a wake-up call for anyone. No matter how they've been living their life, it's a wake-up call. They start to think, have I done something wrong? Am I doing things, is there things about my life I should change? So she then started to think about the way she treated her son. And so she started to say to him, I'm really sorry the way I treated you. I do love you. And she started to be much more loving towards him. And he described it as being almost as if a switch had been pressed. And as soon as his mother's treatment of him changed from disparaging, hateful, abusive, to loving and very warm, as soon as that change happened, she started to. He went out on the street, and he said it was almost instantaneous. I felt an attraction to women for the first time in my life. For the first time in my life, I felt an attraction to women when it never existed before that. And so he self-diagnosed that there's some connection now between the way my mother has treated me, my hatred towards women, and then that has pushed me towards this unhealthy attraction towards other boys or other men. Um, and then after a while, his mother's terminal cancer was revised, and actually the doctor's prognosis of her terminal cancer changed to be actually to be that it wasn't terminal, that they had been able to fight it and deal with it with chemotherapy or whatever treatment they had, and then therefore she he said she went back to her old ways. She started to treat me badly again, and no sooner did did she return back to her old treatment of me, then I suddenly felt as though my hatred towards women returned, and therefore I didn't feel that attraction towards women again. So there, and with him, it was more about him trying to get some support with counseling, and that's been the biggest challenge, getting somebody who is either Muslim or somebody who may not be Muslim, but who will not just respond when he says, "Look, I feel attraction towards men, and I don't want to live this life." The response would not be, "Oh, you know, this is who you are. This is how. There's nothing wrong with doing that." Yeah, and almost trying to talk him into living that life, which is what lots of counselors do, because ideology has actually colored the way lots of people in different ways of life, different workplaces, and different professional settings respond to this idea. They say, "Look, you should live your life. Don't live your life a lie. Live your life like this." So we've been trying to find him a counselor to support him, which has been a struggle. And I've been trying to keep in contact with him in order to help him to fight these desires. And I'll talk about this fighting aspect a little later. There's another example, and I think this is really important as well. There's an example where the mother called me and said, "Look, my daughter has said to me, look, she wants to be a boy. She's dissatisfied with being a girl. She wants to be a boy." Muslim family, they pray 5 times a day. They live a life as much as possible of Islam, but she goes, "I don't know what to do." And I said, "Look, what you need to do is just obviously show that love to her, show that she's still loved, and just try and find out what is going on in her life." Because when somebody says they want to do something as drastic as that, it's almost a cry for help. There's something deeper down, some sort of hole, some sort of trauma, something that is below the surface that isn't apparent in what she's saying in terms of, "I want to be a boy." There's something deeper down that she's not talking about, that not highlighting, not clarifying. There's something deeper down that is at the heart of this issue, and you just try and find out what that is. And after a long time, many weeks of trying to just speak to her normally to find out what's going on in her life, it came down to one simple thing, which may seem trivial, but in the mind of this young girl, who at the time was about 14, 15 years old, it was a big thing. But she lived in a household. She was the only girl. And all the boys all her older brothers, when they'd finish their meal, they would leave the plate, the plate on the table, and she'd have to take it to the sink, take it to the sink and wash it. She would have to pick up their clothes. She would have to do all the chores, iron their clothes. She'd have to do all sorts of things in the household which they didn't have to do. And in her mind, she felt it completely rational to believe that if she changed from being a girl to being a boy, she wouldn't have to do that. She could just do this. She could just live life as carefree as they were expected to live. And so we said, "Look, what we need to do in this household is just change that. Expect your boys, when they finish their meal, at least to move the dish to the place where it's going to be washed, or even wash the dish themselves. Not to expect your youngest daughter to pick up after them. Yeah. And so when they did that, she said, look, she admitted, look, I didn't really want to be a boy. Yeah. But I was dissatisfied with the dynamics in this household. And and it was almost a cry for help. It was almost as if she was saying, look, I need help. I need somebody to solve this problem for me. And this is one of the ways in which she felt she could do that. Now imagine if she said, look, I want to be a boy, and then everybody around her said, yeah, you should be a boy. And the more that people around her um, uh, 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 gave some reality to this feeling, made the feeling seem that it's not just a feeling, it's something real. And they would they continually almost celebrate that desire to change from being a girl to a boy, and continually do that. That could lead to a situation, as it has for lots of young people, yeah, who had this feeling that they're in the wrong body. It made something that was just a feeling become something much more concrete, like almost an action plan for change, rather than, oh, this is a feeling that will pass. And so people around the person can make something that is that will pass with time. Yeah, that is just an idea in the mind that needs to be there needs to be some changes made to get to deal with this problem, but it can become very concrete over time, by the very affirmatory response, the affirming of the people around her. Oh, this is who you are. This is yours. Oh, brave. We support you fully. This is what you should do. Almost giving her consent, and permission to change from being a girl to a boy. And finally, I just want to give one more example that I came across recently. Family contacted me and said, "Look, a boy had been in contact with a. So this boy was about 15 at the time, and he'd been in contact with an older man on some sort of social media app, social app, and he in the end they had long conversations, and it got to a stage where the man convinced that young boy that he should come to his house, and that they would spend some time together. And so he ended up ordering an Uber for this young man, and then he went in the Uber and went to his house, and they engaged in a sexual relationship. And the father and mother found out, and they were so angry, and they didn't know what to do. And we spoke about this situation, and obviously it was an act of recklessness, but it's almost as well. There was issues there where there was a lack of real connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that boy's life. There was a lack of a strong relationship with the father. The father had a strong relationship with the other son, not with him. So there was a lot of factors at play here. And so we said, look, we've got to start to think. He's got to get counselling to try and help him to talk about what he went through, because he went through some level of abuse. He was actually 16 at the time, and there was some legal issues there that they were exploring as well. But he needs counselling, and also he needs to the father also needs to make extra effort to build a stronger relationship with that son, to make him know that he's loved. Because sometimes these a child who grows up without that love of the father will seek to substitute that love with anything that resembles it. Yeah. And so a sexual relationship with another man could give the attention to that boy that he's not getting from his father. And it may sound like a very strange way of filling that void, but these things are not. They're not some. They're not. They're in the heat of the moment. These are not rational decisions that people are making, but rather people are overtaken by the circumstances, by the trauma, by the feeling that they are lacking something, which they didn't get, which they seek to then substitute with something else. So how do we respond? I think this is really important. Now, when we look at, actually, I want to start with the second one first, actually. the tendency in our community around these issues is that we focus on being reactive when situations happen. We don't look at proactive responses. We look at reactive. So when the fire hits our home, when our son says something, our daughter says something, then we start to act. But we don't look at what do we do to stop that from happening. We said that there's lots of vulnerabilities which make children much more susceptible to this ideology, this LGBTQ ideology. That doesn't mean it will affect children in the same way. The same that doesn't mean that it will affect every child in the same way. What it does mean is that we need to recognize these vulnerabilities and plug those gaps to stop the potential for that to harm our children. So we need to be proactive, and we need to look at a holistic solution. We need to look at things beyond just, I need to deal with this particular issue. Because as we said before, if a child says that I identify as gay, or I'm a girl who wants to be a boy, now if you were to talk about that in a piecemeal way, you just address the problem that child is presenting. That is not going to solve the problem. You need to look at things much more holistically. Yeah, children are not just about that one dimension. You look at holistic. Look at the whole issue around relationships with the family. Look at issues around what is their relationship with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. What issues are they facing in their lives that is creating this weakness, and who are their friends? What's the environment like? What influences are they around them? And we need to appreciate in understanding this issue in a much more holistic way, and then deal with underlying issues. As I said, in all of those examples, the child was not. It was almost a cry for help. There were other issues that had to be resolved that should have been resolved. Either a child thinks they're different, they don't fit into the mold of the boy, or the girl who thinks that she's a girl who would be called a tomboy maybe 10 years ago, now thinks actually she should have been born a boy because she doesn't like the things that girls like. So deal with underlying issues. A lot of the times it needs counseling. It needs for the child to talk through their issues, but it has to be with somebody who's trustworthy, somebody who is not going to make things worse, but rather somebody who understands an Islamic perspective on these issues, and will allow the child to express their concerns so that they can give them advice which is in their best interest. And all of this is centered around developing a personal, authentic relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, if our children understand Islam in a very ritualistic way, yeah, so they go through the motions when they're praying, yeah, they read the Quran, but they don't know what that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually communicating guidance through these words. It's not just a set of words that you're just reciting, but actually this is guidance, yeah, and it's the best guidance for humanity to navigate the challenges that they face in life, and the way they organize themselves. If they have this personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the things I think is really important is that a child, and all of us, yeah, in order to, there's two things that I think are hugely important in developing a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One is obviously, and it's not the magic pill, but these two things I think need to be emphasized more. One is developing a level of gratitude for the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, and naming those things and connecting with the source of those blessings. So because gratitude, the absence of gratitude is always a sign of ingratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, leads to many other issues. Just by identifying, look what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me. He's given me a home over my head. He's given me clothes. He's given me so many opportunities to live my life. Every day is a source of blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when people around me at my age have died. So just recognizing the many sources of blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us as a source of gratitude. And the second thing I think is really important in building that personal connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that goes beyond the ritualistic elements that could potentially become things which I'm just doing this because everybody does it, is dua. Making heartfelt dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our children saying to Allah, oh Allah, give me this, give me that, or give me the best in this life. Asking Allah for things that they want and need, whatever they are. Yeah, obviously as long as they're permissible, but things that they need, and they're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Him to give them that. Yeah, and that it establishes that personal communication with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that creates that authentic relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we don't have time to go into great detail on that, but these are just some observations that we could maybe talk about as well. Also, children understanding their foundational purpose. Our children live in a society where the purpose of most people is to satisfy sensual pleasure. And sometimes when I speak to Muslims, I feel as though, to a certain extent, they have the same view as other people. It's like to live life and enjoy the things which Allah has made permissible is absolutely fine. But when that becomes almost the driver for living life, you find Muslims, they go holiday all over the world, they eat the best food, they do this, and that becomes their life. And if there were non-Muslims would do the same thing, go around the world. They're living life in terms of just to fulfill sensual pleasure. Now, I'm not saying holidays are wrong, or I'm just saying that we need to develop a clear understanding of what our primary purpose in life is. Our primary purpose of life is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This life is a temporary abode within which we strive for our real lives, which is the lives in the akhirah, not this life. This life we live, absolutely we live, and we can enjoy things in this life, but that's not our ultimate purpose. Our children live in a society where the purpose of most people in this society is to attain as much pleasure, as much happiness that they define for themselves what the happiness is in this life as possible. And so therefore, our children sometimes can aspire to those same objectives, those same goals, those same missions in their life, to attain as much pleasure as possible. But our foundational purpose is what it still is, has always been from the time the Prophet came. And even before that, all the prophets came to remind people that their whole purpose in life is to worship and please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the ultimate purpose and goal, beyond which you navigate life, but that's the ultimate purpose. And so when you struggle with something in life, that struggle is part of that ultimate purpose of meaning. When sometimes if children don't understand, or if children don't not that they're under the way of they may understand it, as you go through life, your way of understanding your purpose becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. But even as a child is able to appreciate what that objective is at some level. Yeah. And so if they are going through tests and difficulties in their lives, if they're struggling with things in their lives, and they're able then to connect it with the ultimate purpose, yeah, it becomes much easier for them to adopt the mentality that all of the things that are happening to me should be understood within the context of my ultimate purpose in life. And we also need to ensure within the home children feel loved. Yeah, as I said, it's a real risk factor where a child doesn't feel loved, and they seek that love through other means. And love in this society has become distorted. So it could mean love, it could mean lust, it could mean whatever is considered to be love in society, because it's been so diluted and destroyed and so dirtied. But if a child doesn't feel love in the home, they'll seek love elsewhere in whatever way they can feel that attention. Love could be attention. Love could be the feeling of being valued by somebody else. Love could be the feeling of positive words from somebody else. So love has many forms, but with those vulnerabilities, a child could seek that love in very dark places. And also, it's very important to be aware of environmental influences. As I said before, you know, one of the one of the things that can keep a child secure, or that can completely destroy a child or take them away from the lives that we want our children to lead, which is that purpose-driven life, is that it is friends. The influence of friends is huge, and therefore we need to ensure our children have good friends and good company around them. No matter how society has changed, the influence of friends is far greater than many other influences, and so we've got to ensure that our children's environment, local environment around them, is filled with people who have a like-minded understanding of what their purpose is. And therefore, I think we need to really think about that as a risk factor as well. And I think as parents as well, if we struggle to protect our children from those influences which are harmful to their deen, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make things easier for us as well. Yeah. But I think we've got to have this mentality that we are protecting them. Yeah. The number of people I speak to say, oh, what's the point of me doing that? What's the point of me taking this action? It's not going to really have any impact in my life. What's the point? All of these influences are conspiring against me. I can't do anything about that. Now, if you have that attitude, then that you're almost saying, I don't care about the influences that my child comes across. So if you're able in schools to try and challenge some of the things that are being taught, do that. If you're able to challenge it in the local society in which you live, anything you're able to do to challenge negative influences and immoral influences in our children's lives, firstly, that's part of the action of enjoining good, forbidding evil that we are collectively responsible for achieving. But also, we have guardianship over our children, and so we've got to protect them from some of these negative influences. But if we do that, I've really seen that in lots of people, and even in my own life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will support you and protect you as well. So it's about recognizing the influences and realistically challenging some of those threats. We've also got to within our children recognize there's a very fundamental thing that we've got to talk about is that being different does not equal identifying as being LGBTQ. What does being different mean? Being different means a whole host of different things. Some children may have a softer temperament. Some may be more harder. Some children are more introverted. They feel uncomfortable mixing around people. They're not as confident around others. Other children are so outgoing that they can speak to anybody and have a conversation with anybody at any time. Children are different, and we need to recognize that difference. The thing that the LGBTQ community has done is they've hijacked this point of a difference, and they've said every difference leads to the path towards the LGBTQ rainbow, and therefore we need to destroy this idea. There is no correlation. Some children are different. That difference doesn't mean anything. So I don't think we'll go at some time. Maybe at some point we can go through this. I wanted to go through certain things, but I think we'll leave that. But I think I just wanted to very briefly talk about the online program that we're going to start, and I'm going to deal with some of those sessions, and that we have other facilitators for the other sessions. And I think it's an opportunity for us to look at these subjects in a much more in-depth way, in a much more personal way. We've given you really practical tips and advice and helping you to navigate this issue correctly from the point of view of Islam, point of view of our very worldview, the way we view life within that context. And I think I'll really urge you to consider joining that course, and we can go on a learning journey together to support you in understanding all of these key modules. And inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, bless your families, protect you, and safeguard you, and protect our entire ummah from these harms. And I think we've got some time for Q&A. And so I will open it out to you for that. I'm going to go for the chat as well. I think maybe I think there was a lot of messages throughout the session. Obviously, I didn't have the time to go through them, but obviously, I think if you've got any questions, put them in the chat, and then we'll take them in turn. And if there's any other questions that have come about through the chat while I was delivering this presentation, then I'll also look through that and take any relevant ones out from there as well. Okay. I'll just take a couple of questions as we go through, and then if anybody else has any questions, please do. As Sister Debbie was talking about, she's got concern about transgender ideology in schools. She's concerned about teaching unions and that they'll ignore the guidance that the previous government in the UK produced. Will the teachers and their unions ignore the guidance and teach it anyway? Plus, we don't know if the Labour government are going to ignore the previous work done. And I think the point here is, and it's a really good question, is I think we need to do as much as we can to ensure that we advocate on behalf of children to protect and safeguard them. Yeah, and so to a certain extent, what the government does or doesn't do is their final decision is out of our control. But what we do to raise our voices is really important. So, recently there was earlier in the year there was this guidance document that you're alluding to, and we asked lots of Muslims to respond to the consultation, and a lot of Muslims did. Most Muslims didn't, and so we got to say we got to be better at responding to these things, because the way they look at these things is if very few people support the measures that the positive measures that are being introduced into schools, or they are proposing to introduce to schools, if very few people support that, then they have an argument to say that we don't have to follow that. Similarly, just recently, another consultation that we promoted closed, and we got lots of Muslims responding, but not enough. So what we got to do is make sure that we continually raise our voice on these issues to protect our children in schools. And after we've done whatever we can, if they implement something that goes against our deen, but we've fulfilled our covenant to Allah. We've done what we can. We've at least taken steps. But if we're not taking steps to be a part of that race, to the finish line, then we got no hope of finishing that race. So I think we've got to do what we can to ensure that we raise our concerns, and obviously we'll be taking lots of steps to try and advise the Muslim community on what to do within the weeks ahead as well, inshallah. And let me see. How to give da'wah to LGBTQ? I'm interested. The issue is, look, the reality is that we shouldn't think of people as segmenting them. Yeah, if you're giving da'wah to a person, you're trying to speak to a person about Islam. You don't say, how do I speak to a white person about Islam? How do I speak to a black person about Islam? How do I speak to an LGBTQ person about Islam? Now, certain factors around the way a person lives, or the choices they make, or the ideas they carry may have an impact on how you speak to a person. But actually pigeonholing the people to say, how do I speak to this particular community? No, the reality is you speak to anybody based upon a human being with certain fitrawi components within them, certain things that Allah subhanahu has created within them. Allah subhanahu has created within human beings the capacity to recognize that they were created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have the capacity and a thinking mind to look at the reality around them and know that what they see around them has been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have the capacity to acknowledge that they didn't come about through chance. They have the capacity to acknowledge that human beings need to be given some guidance in terms of how to live life. Otherwise, it becomes a morality free-for-all. Like, if your morality is that and my morality is this, it's based upon what our individual likes and dislikes are. So what I want will be my morality, what you want will be your morality. You have just really foundational discussions with them. You ask them questions about what do you think our purpose in life is. That simple conversations with them about that, and you don't actually discuss necessarily in the beginning why LGBTQ is wrong. That's not the way to deliver da'wah to people. You need almost a fundamental idea about tawheed, about who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why do we submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is our purpose behind life, who created us and for what purpose. All of these things are almost fundamental and foundational to everyone. Later on, as we build their understanding of their purpose, obviously other issues will come about, but that shouldn't be the beginning of those conversations. And I really believe there's a huge amount of people in the society who are lost and who will gain some sense of certainty and security and dignity in being Muslim. And so it's a big challenge for us in how do we convey this deen to the others. Now, so partly it's about how we do that overt da'wah to other people, but also it's also about how we live lives. If we're living lives in a society as a Muslim community, as anybody else is, selfishly, just that we don't care about anybody else apart from ourselves. We don't sacrifice for others. We don't give to others. We don't help others. We don't show what the actual practice of Islam is on a person who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger. Then what da'wah are we giving? So we got to also think about how do we overtly give da'wah in the conversations we have, but also in the way we deal with others. Because society on the whole is selfish. Yeah, it's individualistic. It comes from capitalism. It almost encourages that selfishness, and we've got to show society that actually where the Islamic way of life, the Islamic way of living, is far removed from that selfishness. It's actually about concern for others, and we want the best for others, and we show that in our speech and in our actions. Okay, so let me see. Let me look at other. I think I've got some more questions that I'll go down. A lot of them are comments, so I won't answer those. So in a nutshell, we need to counsel our kids who are in trans, despite being Muslim. I mean, I think you need to clarify that question, because I think the whole maybe the way, maybe because you're doing shorthand speech is not clear what you're asking. But if you're asking, give counseling to children who believe they're trans, the issue is that people are not born in the wrong body. Yeah. Now, this is not the Islamic perspective on it. This is the reality perspective on it. There's nothing which says that a person is born in the wrong body. It's if we didn't have this ideology that was tainting this whole discussion, we would recognize there are children who are just in need of help. Yeah. If a child, for example, is cutting themselves, they're harming themselves, self-harm, they're cutting themselves. We don't say to our child, okay, let's help you to live that life you want to live. No, we're saying there's something wrong in your life. Let's try and work out what it is. But when a child wants to mutilate their body so that they change from being a boy to a girl or a girl to a boy, we say, actually, let's help you along that pathway. It's ideology that's tainted this issue. There's nothing within a person which is a reality which exists in a person that says that if you were a boy, you could possibly be in a girl. If you're a girl, you could possibly be in a boy. It's a feeling in the mind. It's a situation. It's psychological distress, and we need to work out what the actual issue is within that child's life that's leading them to that conclusion. Yeah, and the problem with in the past, and the government. There was an independent review, as somebody mentioned in the chat. It's called a CAST review. They looked into how children who are saying, "I'm a girl, should be a boy. I'm a boy, should be a girl," how they were being dealt with by there was a clinic called the Tavistock Clinic and other clinics like that, which is gender identity service, and someone was saying, look, a child was saying, look, I feel like I'm a boy, I should be a girl. Or I'm a girl. Mostly it's I'm a girl, I should be a boy. So I'm a girl, I should be a boy. I need help. Now, instead of saying, okay, let's give you some counseling to find out what's happening, they would say, okay, that's what you want to be, then we'll help you to do that. So they'll give them what they call puberty blockers. This is chemicals which stop the natural process of puberty taking place in a child. Yeah, so a child would not go through puberty. They would just not go through puberty, and then when the child was old enough, then they would give that adult now who'd been going through puberty blockers all their life. They would be given cross-sex hormones. So a girl, for example, would be given testosterone in order to develop more maleness in terms of their speech and their body. They'll be then given the ability to decide on surgery to remove parts of the body or to accentuate parts of the body. And within that, they'll also be given things like chest binders. A girl would be given binders so that their chest would be flat. And all of this is part of that abuse. So there was this CAS review that said that children were being failed. And so the Tavistock clinic was closed. That particular clinic was closed. And they said, and actually a lot of people, a lot of girls and boys who were changing, they came back and said, I felt like I was, I shouldn't have changed, but people around me helped me to change. And I didn't want to be a girl or a boy. I wanted to stay like that, but now my life's been ruined. So I think there is a lot of issues here that we need to understand within this whole claim that a boy wants to be a girl or a girl wants to be a boy as something that's real. It's not real. This is a psychological distress that needs to be dealt with. Okay, so I'm just trying to go through some of the questions that are more, let me see, practical. So sexual activities of any sort are not allowed in the Muslim community. Not allowed in Islam. Okay, let's make it very clear. So it's not allowed in Islam. Allah subhanahu has forbidden sexual relationships outside of marriage. Are you saying we allow our son to have girlfriends? No, I didn't say that. I don't think maybe you misunderstood something I said. No, we shouldn't allow our boys to have girls as friends or boys to have girls as friends. No, this is not the idea of having platonic friends between boys and girls is a nonsense. It's not something that we say we do, but rather we ensure that they don't. And actually, it's strange that a boy having friends who are girls and vice versa. The reality in Islam is that we separate the sexes, the boys and the girls, from each other, and we don't encourage those interactions unless there's a purpose behind it. You go to a man goes to a shop to buy something, they have to interact with a woman, but that's for a purpose. Yeah, and even within that, you lower your gaze, you don't go into unnecessary conversation. There's a lot of we need to recognize that there are rules that around the conduct between men and women in Islam that we need to teach our children. What is the best methodology of approach to confront an LGBT person? So firstly, I would say, the question I would say is, why would you want to create dialogue? What is your objective behind that dialogue? And then we can answer the next question. Maybe we can come back to that, inshallah. 100% no one is born in the wrong body. We have to be true. Okay. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Any other questions? I think this is some really interesting questions here. Hopefully I haven't missed anything out. But one of the things that we've got to, and I wanted to talk about this more in my presentation. There's a couple of things that we wanted to understand. A couple of things we have to understand is, one is that this idea of what they call sexuality. Someone who is heterosexual or homosexual or gay or lesbian or bisexual. These are all terms around identity which are not based on the reality. They are terms which came about in the 19th century, end of the 19th century. They give the impression that that people are born with a particular sexuality, and that the sexuality is something that you can discover. So as a child grows, maybe what they'll realize, actually, I am gay, but that's not the case. There's nothing hardwired in a human being around what they call sexuality. Sexuality doesn't exist. It's a term that people use to describe attraction. And attraction can exist, but attraction isn't fixed, and attraction is temporary. Yeah, it's not something which controls you. But the fact is, we live in a society where everything is labeled. So once you, if you're a boy who is attracted to another boy, you are gay, and you have to live that life, and that's the box that you live in. If you are a girl who's attracted to another girl, you are a lesbian, and you have to live that life. But there's nothing in the reality that proves the existence of something which fixes a person's attraction into an identity. So when we talk about these issues, we need to talk about attractions, not identities. Identities don't exist, but attractions do. And we need to talk about how do we deal with attractions rather than how do we deal with identities. What should our relationship be with our in-laws or non-Muslim members of family who live as LGBT? I think in terms of um, I think the reality is that we should show good conduct to the people around us. That doesn't mean that we accept the life that people lead, and both things can happen at the same time. We can be kind and polite to somebody without accepting the ways of life that they lead. Now, if, for example, we think that by having close contact with them, that will expose our children to things which are negative, then we need to make a decision on that. We need to talk to our children about that and tell them about the boundaries of what is acceptable in Islam and what is acceptable conduct, given that we recognize our objective in life is to worship and obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think with that, it's a complex discussion, but there is a way of interacting with people from a whole host of different perspectives, but whilst not almost giving not accepting what they say they are. So you don't have to say I'm an ally of LGBTQ. You treat people generally as human beings. Yeah, if they're non-Muslim, you treat them as human beings, and you don't treat them based upon a label that they adopt. So I think that's that. I think there's a couple of questions. Let me see in the Q&A. Is it important to look out what kind of man one marries? What I mean is it risk factor to marry a man with more on the feminine side than when he has a son, his son might be even more feminine, so that he might be attracted to boys or wanting to become a girl? No, I think in terms of there's the issue of some men being more feminine or some men being more masculine is very difficult to. These are a lot of these things that there's some elements of people which are from something which from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creating it within them. Some children are more softer, some children are harder, and a lot of these there's also lots of environmental factors that could lead to a child being much more softer or being more masculine or being more feminine. Now, I don't think there's any I don't know of any evidence, and I don't really know the answer to this question about whether there's almost like a genetic predisposition to if a father is if a man is more I don't know, feminine, has feminine traits, that will somehow be inherited by a child. I don't know of any existence of evidence of that. But what I'd say is that you marry somebody who you think will be a good father to your children, just like a man marries a woman who will be a good mother to his children. And so that needs to be understood within the mix of things. We're studying theories like the critical race theory helping countering the queer onslaughts. The whole idea of like I would say that we have a lot of the tools that we have within Islam around how we understand different worldviews is enough for us to a certain extent. But a lot of these critical race theories or other ways of approaching things, they are ways of viewing things, and we need to accept that there may be some elements of different theories which could align with our understanding of the reality, but there's also some elements of theories which completely go against the idea of human nature as understood by Muslims, as given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think in terms of I think first of all is I would say, first of all, understand deeply the fundamentals of Islam, and then use those to measure what we can accept and not accept within from other theories. And then you'll be in a better position to almost filter out that which is useful to that which is harmful. In a general form, but I think in order to understand more deeply the question, we need to look into the different elements of theories that for example, there is like even within queer theory. So there's a whole subject called queer theory. They argue that this idea of someone being born gay or lesbian is not real. Nobody is born anything, but rather people the idea of the development of what they call a sexual identity, which we don't say exists in itself, but it's a reality term that they use. That this sexual identity, the way it flourishes, the way it develops, is by a whole series of different environmental factors. Even within the LGBTQ movement, there's a huge conflict between different people. Some people who believe that who don't believe that they were born gay, but they believe that if they were to argue that this is a matter of choice, that would harm their ability to fight for their community. Because if they say you're not born that way, then they would argue that people could say you can change, and they don't want to concede that point. And there's other people who say no. The truth is that who somebody is a complex factor of different environmental factors that somebody goes through in life, and it's also a matter of of choice. So there even within different theorists, there's a huge distinction. There's a huge difference between people who believe that this is something that's almost intrinsic and inborn within the person, the characteristic that you can't change, and other people who believe that it is. But we got to look to the theory, look to the reality, which says that parts of who people are subject to change. Because the next question is, what should our relationship be with in-laws or non-Muslim? Okay, I think I've answered that question in the main thing. I join late. You may have covered this already. What age do you suggest should be talked? Yeah, I think in terms of there is no age. I think there's no age. If there was an age, I would say, yeah, there are just like talking about sexual relationships with children. Yeah, there's a whole host of different factors that we need to take into account that will help us to understand when we start discussions with our children. And the key factor is exposure to different ideas. If our children are going to a state school where they are being subject to LGBTQ identities as part of the curriculum, then we need to know when that's being taught and discuss it much earlier. And that may mean we discuss it much earlier than we would like because they're being exposed to that. But it's not just about school, but if our children watch programs on TV, read books, if they just exist in the society, we will have to start discussing this much earlier. But I'm very much against this idea of saying you should discuss it from 5 or 6 or 7. What I would say is that we should start discussing foundational ideas with our children first. Yeah. Firstly, our children should understand why they are Muslim. Yeah. They should understand that they should connect themselves to the creation of and recognize that that Allah created this world through the signs that they see around them. They should build an understanding of what the Quran is. The Quran is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a guide for how we should live our lives, and that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in a position, not human beings, to define for us what is good and bad. So these sort of key foundational concepts, we should build within them the idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala listens to everything that you have to ask him. So ask Allah, make dua to Allah regularly, if you make a mistake, make tawbah, fundamental ideas. We talked about gratitude before. And then also we need to talk to our children about some ideas that there's nothing there's no action that you do, even if it's an action which is disobedience to Allah, which you seek not to do. If you fall into anything which is disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you regret it and make tawbah straight away. Yeah. And that there's no action that you do that defines who you are. Yeah. No, if you lie once, doesn't mean that you're a liar. Yeah, as long as you recognize that you've done an action of wrong, and you seek to correct that by making tawbah to Allah. And so we build an idea that actions don't define who you are. We build an idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should is the only one to define for us how we navigate through life. Yeah. And when human beings do that, we give examples. When human beings start to define for people how they should navigate life, you'll see contradictions. You'll see people doing things based upon what suits them, yeah, rather than what is for the benefit of society. You see people who are affected by the age in which they live. Yeah. So human beings are completely incapable of defining what is good and bad for themselves, let alone for other people. And then so things that we need to start to in our children, help them to understand that there are differences between men and women. Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created differences between men and women, and the reality shows us the differences. You know, society has, because of feminism, society has sought to destroy all understandings of these differences because they see these differences as almost somewhat either men are superior to women or women are superior to men. This is a nonsense. Yeah, this whole framing of the discussion has destroyed this whole understanding of men and women. Men and women are different in so many different ways, and we'll cover this in our course. But we need to start to have almost foundational discussions that build strength in our children's appreciation of their very purpose in life. And I think that's what we need to do first. So even before we identify LGBTQ and all of these things, you know, we need to build within them a strength in understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us for a purpose. We live 40 or 50 or 60 years or 70, 80 maybe years in our lives. This is a small it's like a small drop in the ocean of what our real lives are, because a life to come will be the life that has no end after we start to live it. Yeah? This is the reason why we were created, to live the life that we were meant to live. And if we if we start to forget that in this short life, then we are sabotaging our true purpose. We're sabotaging the life we're meant to lead in the hereafter. So I think so. We got to really have these almost fundamental discussions first, and then start to get them to appreciate why it is when people come up with these ideologies like LGBTQ movement and whatever, you know, they're never going to be able to come up with anything other than a life which leads people to depression. You know, the instances of depression with the LGBTQ movement, even in societies where it's accepted, yeah, is so high. The amount of self-harm, of suicide, you know, this is not a life that helps people to live a life of security, of even of tranquility. There's no ease in the heart by living this life. Okay, I think there's another question. If the admin can let me know what time we want to end, because I think we've gone over the time. So if admin can let us know, well, because we're meant to finish at 5, we've taken more questions, and I've lost track of time. So if admin can let us know if it's okay for us to continue. I know people may want to leave. Is there anything admin wants to mention as well? Give me some guidance on that, inshallah. And while I'm waiting for that, I'll just take one final question at least. There's a question about latest changes in law about RSC in schools. Is it now reduced, revised, or removed? I recall a report that called into question current curriculums. Have any changes stemmed from that or other pressures of resistance? Now, obviously, in terms of there is no changes per se. The law hasn't changed. What has changed was that the previous government introduced 2 new guidances. One was about they wanted to stop the teaching of gender identity in schools, and they didn't want schools to what they call socially transition children. So when a child says, I'm a girl, I want to be a boy. And some schools would address that girl with a boy's name, allow that girl to wear boys' clothes, allow that girl to enter the boys' changing rooms and things like that. So there's a new guidance which said that shouldn't happen. Social transition has not got any legal basis, so schools should not intervene in that. Rather, schools should inform parents and get them involved, and not take actions almost unilaterally. Now, that guidance was open to consultation, and it ended around the first week of Ramadan, and we're still waiting for the response of the Department of Education for that. And then the second guidance was about revising some of the rules around RSE in schools, a new revised guidance that was launched, which closed, the consultation closed just earlier this week on Thursday. And we're waiting for a response from that as well. So it may not be until the end of the year before we get an idea of the response to the first of all, the consultation being published, and then the status of that guidance, and then what the Labour government intends to do about that. So we're trying to get the community to get involved to raise their voice around these issues. But there's been no changes per se yet, and there won't be any changes until the government has responded to the guidance. Okay, so we're going to wrap up now. And Jazakallah khair for your attendance. As I said, we're doing this course, and if you can, please do sign up for this course. I'm sure you'll get a follow-up email from Balagh about it. It'll be useful for you to join, and we can carry on the journey for these discussions, which are quite complex and can't be dealt with in a 45-minute webinar, as you can imagine. So inshallah, hopefully I'll see you then, and we can continue on with your learning journey on the program, inshallah. Jazakum khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And I said, one final thing, I think somebody asked about the recording. I think this recording will be made available to people. And I think Al-Balagh will inform you about that, inshallah. Jazakum khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.